Jake Torres has been aboard the Varath for 6 months, which is long enough to have learned several important things about living with aliens. First, Kelthori have an excellent sense of smell, which makes sharing a ship with them interesting when you've been working in the engine room for 8 hours. Second, their food is nutritionally adequate for humans, but tastes like what Jake imagines sadness would taste like if sadness were a vegetable. Third, they find human behavior fascinating in the way humans find nature documentaries fascinating, with a mixture of awe and how is that organism still alive? The Varath is a joint research vessel, technically run by both Earth and the Kelthori Science Directorate, practically run by Kelthori because they designed it and humans are still figuring out half the technology. Jake is one of 3 humans aboard a crew of 47. Assigned as chief engineer for the human-compatible sections and general liaison when the cultures clash in confusing ways, which happens approximately 5 times per day minimum. He's adapted reasonably well. Learned to read basic Kelthori ear positions. Forward means interest, flat means distress or annoyance, rotating means they're processing information. Figured out which of the communal foods won't cause digestive rebellion. Even made friends with a few crew members who appreciate his ability to fix things that shouldn't be fixable, and his willingness to explain human behavior without getting defensive about how weird humans are. But he's refused to compromise on one thing: his morning coffee. Every day at 600 station time, Jake brews a cup using supplies shipped from Earth at what he's pretty sure is criminal expense. The shipping manifest lists it as medical supplies psychological wellness, which is technically accurate. Jake without coffee is a psychological unwellness waiting to happen. He uses an old-fashioned pour-over setup because the Varath's food synthesizers can't quite replicate the taste, and he's committed to this one piece of normalcy in a job where normal is relative and usually involves fixing alien technology while floating in zero gravity. The Kelthori find this ritual endlessly fascinating. They've observed him measuring grounds with the precision of religious ceremony, heating water to exactly the right temperature, executing the pour in careful circles like he's performing alchemy, which from his perspective he is, transforming ground beans and water into the elixir that makes him approximately 60% more functional. This morning, his routine is interrupted. Engineer Torres. The voice is tentative, heavily accented standard. May I inquire about your morning ritual? Jake turns, coffee cup halfway to his lips, to find Sira Venthai hovering in the doorway of the small human quarters. She's a xenobiologist, one of the younger Kelthori crew members, assigned to study cross-species interaction as part of her dissertation. Her ears are doing the forward tilt thing that means intense curiosity, and she's clutching a datapad like it's a shield. Morning, Sira, you're up early. Jake tries to remember if he's seen her before 800, decides he hasn't. What's up? I've been observing your morning consumption pattern for several weeks, as part of my research on human behavioral practices. She takes a careful step into the room. You prepare this substance with significant care every day. I would like to understand its purpose. Jake looks at his coffee, looks at Sira. Realizes this is one of those cross-cultural moments that either builds understanding or creates confusion, possibly both. It's coffee. Helps humans wake up, focus, generally transition from unconscious meat to semi-functional person. Want to smell it? He's joking. Offering scent is a Kelthori greeting gesture he's picked up, meant to share information and build familiarity. He doesn't actually expect her to take him seriously. Sira's ears perk up completely vertical. Yes, olfactory analysis would be extremely valuable for my research. May I? Jake shrugs and extends the mug. Sure, knock yourself out, though fair warning it's pretty strong this morning. I might have used too much coffee grounds. Sira approaches with the caution of someone approaching something potentially hazardous, which Jake finds amusing until she actually leans forward and inhales above the mug. Her reaction is immediate, dramatic, and kind of alarming. She recoils so fast she stumbles backward, ears flattening completely against her head, the Kelthori equivalent of absolute shock. Her eyes go wide, pupils contracting to pinpoints. She makes a sound that Jake's translator renders as something between a gasp and a wheeze. "You drink this." The words come out strangled. "Every morning. This white liquid. Technically it's brown. The aromatic compounds." Sierra is backing toward the door like Jake's holding a live grenade. The concentration of alkaloids, the volatile organic compounds. That's, she's checking her datapad frantically, comparing readings to something. "That's a psychoactive substance. You consume this voluntarily." Jake freezes mid-sip, trying to process what just happened. "It's coffee, just coffee. Humans drink it all the time. It's literally the most normal thing we do after breathing." Normal. Sierra has recovered enough to stop backing away, but she's keeping significant distance between herself and the mug. "Engineer Tours, do you understand what you're holding? Those chemical concentrations would require medical supervision for a Kelthori to consume. The caffeine alone," she's scanning the coffee again. "How are you casually drinking this?" Jake takes another sip, partly to prove a point and partly because this conversation requires caffeine to process properly. "It wakes us up, makes us alert, tastes good. I don't know what answer you're looking for here." "Tastes good." Sierra repeats this like he's just claimed to enjoy eating broken glass. May I conduct a full analysis? For my research." "Sure." Jake sets down the mug, now extremely curious about what has Sierra so worked up. "What exactly are you seeing that's got you freaked out?" Sierra produces a handheld scanner from her belt. All Kelthori scientists seem to carry them constantly, probably in case they encounter something that requires immediate scientific documentation. She runs it over Jake's coffee with the intensity of someone scanning for explosives. The readout makes her ears do a complicated twitch that Jake hasn't seen before. This contains caffeine at a concentration of approximately 120 milligrams per 200 milliliters. For context, the maximum safe single dose for a Kelthori would be approximately 8 milligrams with medical supervision. "Okay, so it's strong." "That's kind of the point." "Strong?" Sierra looks up from her scanner. "This isn't strong, it's potentially dangerous. And you said you drink multiple cups. Usually 3 or 4 throughout the day, yeah. Sometimes 5 if it's a long shift." Jake is starting to enjoy this. Is this really that weird? Weird. Sierra's voice climbs an octave. "Engineer Tours, if I consumed even a fraction of what you just drank, I would need immediate medical intervention. My cardiac system would be compromised. My neural processing would become dangerously accelerated. I might experience hallucinations. And you do this every day as routine." "I mean, yeah, coffee is universal among humans. There are entire Earth economies built around it. Wars have been fought over trade routes. The stuff is kind of culturally significant." Sierra sits down slowly on a storage bench, datapad forgotten in her lap, just staring at Jake like he's revealed he's secretly 3 humans in a trench coat. "I've been studying human behavior for 2 standard years. I thought I understood your species' unusual resilience, your ability to consume foods that are toxic to most species, your tolerance for environmental extremes, your capacity to heal from injuries that would be fatal to Kelthori. But this," she gestures helplessly at the coffee, "you've domesticated a psychoactive substance. You consume it casually, build social rituals around it, and call it normal. My species would classify this as a controlled substance, requiring significant regulation." "It's really just bean juice," Jake offers, which probably isn't helping but is technically accurate. "Bean juice." Sierra's ears flatten again. "You've reduced a complex chemical cocktail capable of significantly altering biochemistry to bean juice. I mean, if you want to be dramatic about it, sure. But from a human perspective, coffee is just coffee. It's morning fuel. It's social bonding. It's the substance that makes civilization possible." Jake picks up his mug again, Want me to explain the cultural significance, or should I start with the chemistry? Please. Sierra recovers her datapad, stylus poised. Explain everything. I need to completely revise my understanding of human risk tolerance. Jake settles in for what's clearly going to be a longer conversation than anticipated. Okay, so coffee comes from beans. Well, seeds technically, but everyone calls them beans. We discovered that roasting and brewing them creates this drink that makes us more alert. That was probably a few thousand years ago, and we've been obsessed ever since. Obsessed, Sierra echoes, writing frantically. Yeah, like culturally obsessed. Coffee shops are major social spaces. First dates happen over coffee. Business meetings, study sessions. We have entire industries dedicated to growing, processing, and serving it. Some people are really snobby about their brewing methods, pour over versus French press versus espresso. There are competitions. Certifications, it's a whole thing. So it's not just consumption, it's a complex cultural practice with significant social dimensions. Sierra's ears are forward again, scientist brain engaged. And the chemical effects, you mentioned it makes you alert. Yeah, caffeine blocks adenosine receptors in the brain. Adenosine makes you sleepy, so blocking it makes you feel awake. Also triggers dopamine release, which makes you feel good. It's basically borrowing energy from your future self, but humans decided that's an acceptable trade-off for being functional in the morning. Borrowing energy from your future self. Sierra writes this down word for word. That's remarkably honest about the physiological cost. Oh, there's definitely a cost. If I don't drink coffee, I get withdrawal headaches, irritability, can't focus, basically become a less pleasant version of myself until I get caffeine back in my system. Sierra's stylus stops moving. You're describing chemical dependency. I prefer have a healthy relationship with caffeine, but yeah, technically. Jake finishes his cup, but it's socially acceptable dependency. Employers encourage it because caffeinated workers are productive workers. Coffee breaks are built into labor laws in some places. It's infrastructure. Your species has normalized chemical dependency in service of productivity. Sierra sounds like she's having a revelation. That explains so much about human industrial capacity. You're chemically augmenting yourselves as standard practice. When you phrase it like that, it sounds dystopian. Is it not? I mean, Jake considers this, maybe a little. But also coffee is delicious and makes life better, so we're okay with it. Humans are really good at accepting trade-offs if the benefits are immediate and the costs are abstract. Sierra is writing so fast her stylus is probably going to catch fire. This is extraordinary. You're giving me material for at least 5 papers. May I ask, what other substances do humans consume casually that would be considered dangerous to other species? Oh boy. Okay, so there's alcohol, which is literally poison, but we drink it recreationally. There's tea, which is like coffee but from leaves and with different alkaloids. Energy drinks, which are like coffee but with more chemicals and marketing. Chocolate contains theobromine, which I'm pretty sure is toxic to a bunch of species, but humans just eat it for fun. Spicy food. Please stop. Sierra holds up a hand. I need to process this information sequentially. Let's stay focused on coffee. You said the taste is enjoyable. Yeah, it's bitter but complex. Changes a lot depending on the beans, where they're grown, how they're roasted, how you brew them. Some people like it black, some add cream and sugar. There's a whole art to it. So it's not just the chemical effects, it's also a sensory experience you find pleasurable. Exactly. Though honestly, a lot of humans probably drink it more for the caffeine than the taste. But we pretend it's about the taste, because that sounds more sophisticated than I'm chemically dependent on a stimulant. Sierra laughs. She's learned the gesture from humans and deployed it with increasing frequency. You're remarkably self-aware about your species' relationship with this substance. I've had a lot of coffee. Self-awareness comes with the territory. Jake stands to brew another cup. You want to try some? just a sip for research purposes. Sierra's ears flatten immediately. Absolutely not. The scent alone was overwhelming. Actually consuming it would likely require medical intervention. Fair, but now you've got me curious about how other species react to human food and drinks. Has anyone done that research? Some preliminary studies, yes. Most species find human cuisine aggressively seasoned. Sierra is being diplomatic. Your tolerance for capsaicin, acids, and fermented foods is unusual. Coffee fits the pattern. Humans seek out intense sensory experiences that other species find uncomfortable or dangerous. We like excitement. What can I say? Jake starts his second cup of the morning, the ritual soothing even while being observed. Though I guess from your perspective, we're kind of reckless. Reckless implies lack of awareness. You know the risks. You mentioned withdrawal, dependency, the physiological costs. You simply decide the benefits outweigh those risks and proceed anyway. Sierra watches him pour with fascination. That's not recklessness. That's calculated risk acceptance, which is perhaps more remarkable. But Jake hadn't thought about it that way. So humans are good at cost-benefit analysis. Humans are good at deciding that benefit now, cost later is an acceptable framework for decision-making. Most species prioritize long-term stability over short-term enhancement. Humans do the opposite, then build systems to make that approach sustainable. She gestures at his coffee. You've created a global infrastructure around a substance that creates dependency. That's extraordinary adaptation. Or extraordinary stubbornness. We really like our coffee and refuse to give it up even when it's probably not the healthiest choice. But both can be true. Sierra's ears twitch with what Jake has learned means contentment or satisfaction. Thank you for this conversation, Engineer Tours. You've given me significantly more insight into human psychology than I expected to gain this morning. But happy to help. Though I feel like I should get co-author credit if you're writing papers about my coffee consumption. That can be arranged. You're officially a research participant now. Do I get paid? But you get the satisfaction of advancing xenobiological understanding. I'd prefer coffee. Of course you would, Sierra says with obvious affection. Because you're human and humans have domesticated their vices. But she leaves Jake to finish his second cup in peace, though he suspects this conversation is far from over. He's accidentally become a case study in human resilience through the simple act of drinking his morning coffee. Could be worse, he thinks. At least it's interesting. By lunch period, though Jake still thinks of it as late morning because his circadian rhythm refuses to fully sync with station time, word of the coffee incident has spread through the Kelthori crew with impressive speed. Apparently, human casually consumes controlled substance every morning, is prime gossip material regardless of species. Jake is in the engineering bay, elbow deep in a thruster calibration that requires more patience than he currently possesses, when Sierra finds him again. She's accompanied by what looks like half the science team, all of them regarding Jake with the fascination usually reserved for particularly interesting lab specimens. Engineer Tours, Sierra says with the formality that means she's in professional researcher mode. Would you be willing to answer additional questions about human caffeine consumption practices? My colleagues have expressed significant interest in your morning ritual. Jake extracts himself from the thruster assembly, wiping grease on a rag that's already more grease than fabric. Sure, I guess. Though I'm not sure what else there is to say about coffee that wasn't covered this morning. Oh, there's significantly more, says Dr. Kelthais, the ship's chief medical officer, stepping forward. He's older than most of the crew, his ears bearing the slight droop that comes with age. For instance, I'd like to understand the long-term physiological effects. You've been consuming this substance daily for how long? Since I was 15, so about 12 years. 12 years of regular psychoactive substance consumption. Kelthais is scanning Jake with a medical scanner, which feels invasive, But Jake has learned that Kelthori scientists consider scanning things a basic conversational gesture. And you experience no adverse effects. I mean, I get jittery if I drink too much. And if I try to quit, I get headaches and become extremely unpleasant to be around. But mostly I'm just functional. Functional. Kelthais reviews his scanner readout. Your baseline neural activity is elevated compared to the human readings we have on file. Your cardiac rhythm shows adaptation to regular stimulant exposure. You've developed physiological tolerance. Yeah, that's how caffeine works. You build tolerance over time, need more to get the same effect. It's pretty standard for humans. The science team exchanges looks that Jake interprets as some combination of fascination and concern. Let me see if I understand correctly, says another researcher whose name Jake thinks is Ventris. Humans develop tolerance to a psychoactive substance, requiring increased dosage to maintain effect, experience withdrawal symptoms when deprived, and this is considered standard. For coffee, yeah. It's not like hard drugs or anything. From our biochemical perspective, it is precisely like what you call hard drugs. Ventris is taking notes. You've simply normalized it culturally to the point where you don't recognize it as such. Sira jumps in, clearly having appointed herself as translator between Jake's casual human perspective and the science team's analytical approach. What my colleagues are trying to understand is how humans maintain this practice without significant social disruption. Dependency on psychoactive substances typically leads to behavioral problems, health crises, or social dysfunction. Yet your species has integrated caffeine consumption into daily life successfully. Because it works, Jake offers. Like, yeah, we're dependent on it, but it makes us more productive, helps us focus, improves mood. The benefits outweigh the costs for most people. Plus, it's legal, socially acceptable, and relatively safe compared to other substances we could be consuming. Relative safety, Kelthais mutters. Humans have fascinating definitions of safety. Can we talk about the social aspects? Sira asks, stylus poised over her datapad. You mentioned coffee shops, first dates, business meetings. How does the consumption practice integrate into social bonding? Jake leans against the workbench, trying to figure out how to explain Earth's entire coffee culture to aliens who find the substance itself alarming. Okay, so coffee shops are major social spaces on Earth. People meet there to talk, work, study. There's a whole ritual around it. You order your drink, customize it exactly how you like it, sit in a comfortable chair. It's neutral territory, public but intimate, good for conversations. So the substance facilitates social interaction, Ventris says. Sort of. It's more like coffee gives people an excuse to sit down together. The drink itself is almost secondary to the social function, though the caffeine probably helps people be more alert and engaged in conversation. Chemical enhancement of social bonding, Kelthais says. Remarkable, and business meetings. Oh, definitely. Coffee meetings are standard professional practice. Let's grab coffee is code for let's have a casual business discussion. Conference rooms always have coffee. When you put it that way, it sounds really intense. It is really intense. Sira's ears are practically vibrating with excitement. Don't you see? This is extraordinary human behavior. You found a plant that produces a chemical that makes you feel better, figured out how to process it, built global trade networks around it, created social rituals incorporating it, and normalized consumption to the point where going without it is considered unusual. That's not just adaptation, that's domestication of chaos. Domestication of chaos, Jake repeats. That's actually a pretty good description of humanity in general. Precisely, Sira is in full research mode now. This pattern appears throughout human culture. You domesticate predators and call them pets. You consume foods that are toxic to other species and call them delicious. You seek out physical risk for recreation and call it entertainment. Coffee is just one example of a broader pattern. Humans encounter something dangerous or intense and immediately try to make it routine. Jake considers this. I guess we do that, yeah. Never really thought about it as a pattern, but yeah. If something's scary or difficult, humans tend to poke at it until we figure out how to control it, or at least how to survive it consistently. And you do this consciously, Kelthais asks. You're aware that you're engaging with risk and simply accept it. Mostly. I mean, nobody drinks coffee thinking I'm going to develop chemical dependency today. But we know it's addictive, we know it has side effects, and we decide we're okay with that. Calculated risk, like Sira said earlier. Fascinating. Kelthais is still reviewing his scanner data. Your species' risk tolerance explains so much about your space exploration patterns, your military strategies, your technological development. You're willing to accept significant personal risk if you believe the potential reward justifies it. Or if we just think it'll be interesting, Jake adds. Sometimes humans do risky things purely because we're curious about what happens. Scientific method, but with less oversight and more potential for explosions. The science team exchanges looks again. Jake is getting better at reading Kelthari nonverbal communication. This particular look translates roughly to, "This explains so much and also raises more questions." Okay, Sira says, clearly trying to organize the flood of information. Let me see if I can synthesize this. Humans consume caffeine regularly despite knowing it creates dependency. You've built economic and social structures around this practice. You accept the risks because you value the benefits, and this is considered completely normal behavior. Yes to all of that. And other humans, your friends, family, colleagues, they all do this too. Pretty much everyone I know drinks coffee or tea or energy drinks. Some people abstain for health or religious reasons, but they're the minority. Caffeine consumption is baseline normal for human adults. Sira looks at her colleagues. I need to completely revise my dissertation. This isn't just an interesting behavioral quirk. This is fundamental to understanding human psychology. Happy to help, Jake offers, though I still think you're making coffee sound way more dramatic than it actually is. That's because you're human, Kelthais says. You've been conditioned to see this as normal. From an external perspective, your species' casual relationship with psychoactive substances is remarkable and slightly terrifying. Slightly terrifying, Jake echoes. I'm going to put that on my resume. Human engineer. Slightly terrifying to alien colleagues. You should absolutely do that, Sira says with what Jake has learned is her version of a grin. Now, one more question for today. May I observe you consuming coffee again? I want to record detailed behavioral data during the consumption process. You want to watch me drink coffee? For science, Sira confirms. This is the weirdest research participation I've ever agreed to, but sure. I was going to have another cup anyway. 3-cup minimum, remember. The science team follows Jake to the human quarters like he's leading an extremely caffeinated field trip. He goes through his usual routine, measuring grounds, heating water, executing the pour with practiced precision, while 5 Kelthari researchers watch with the intensity of people observing a controlled demolition. You're very precise with your measurements, Ventress observes. Consistency is important. Too much coffee and it's bitter, too little and it's weak. You want the right ratio. You've optimized the dosage, Kelthais says. That's harm reduction strategy. Humans do understand safety principles. You just apply them within a framework that accepts baseline risk. I really just want my coffee to taste good, but sure, harm reduction works too. Jake completes the pour, lets it drip through, produces a cup of coffee that's probably his best work today. The aroma fills the small space, rich, complex, slightly sweet. The science team reacts with varying degrees of fascination and alarm. The scent compounds, Sira says, checking her scanner. Over 300 distinct aromatic molecules. How do you process that much sensory information? I don't think about it. It just smells like coffee. Jake takes his first sip, closes his eyes to appreciate it properly. Okay, this batch came out really good. Nice acidity, smooth finish, hints of chocolate and citrus. You're analyzing flavor profiles while consuming a psychoactive substance, Ventress interrupts. That's remarkable sensory discrimination under influence. That under influence makes it sound like I'm impaired. I'm just drinking coffee. You've increased your neural processing speed by approximately 15%, Kelthais says, reading his medical scanner. Your cardiac rhythm has elevated. You're experiencing measurable cognitive enhancement. That's being under influence. Jake pauses mid-sip. I guess I never thought about it that way. It's just normal operating mode for humans. Normal operating mode includes voluntary cognitive enhancement through substance consumption, Sira says, writing frantically. This is revolutionary data for cross-species psychology. I'm just drinking coffee, Jake protests weakly. You're demonstrating fundamental human adaptation strategies, Sira counters. You're making the complex look simple, making the dangerous look routine. That's the human trick. You domesticate chaos so thoroughly that you forget it's chaos. Jake finishes his cup while being observed like a lab experiment, which should feel weird but mostly just feels like Tuesday at this point. The science team takes enough notes to write a textbook, asks enough questions to fill a graduate seminar, and eventually disperses to their respective labs to process the data. Sira lingers after the others leave. Thank you for being patient with us, she says. I know being studied is uncomfortable. It's fine, kind of interesting actually. I've never thought about coffee as anything other than coffee. Jake rinses his cup. You're making me see it differently. Good differently or bad differently? Good, I think. It's making me appreciate what humans do without thinking about it. We're pretty resilient when you step back and look at it objectively. Sira's ears do the contentment twitch. You're very resilient. That's what I'm trying to document, not just the coffee consumption, but what it represents about human psychology. You face harsh conditions and you don't just endure them. You find ways to make them bearable, even enjoyable. Coffee is one tool among many. Tools for making life less terrible, Jake muses. Yeah, that's pretty human. Exactly. Sira gathers her datapad. I'm giving a presentation to the full crew this evening about my preliminary findings. Would you be willing to attend? As the primary research subject, your perspective would be valuable. You're giving a presentation about my coffee consumption. I'm giving a presentation about human resilience as expressed through normalization of psychoactive substance consumption, with coffee as the primary case study. That's just presentation about my coffee with extra words. Yes, but it sounds more academically legitimate this way. Sira has definitely learned human humor. Please, it would mean a lot to have you there. Jake agrees, partly because Sira's genuine enthusiasm is hard to refuse, and partly because he's curious what a formal presentation about his morning routine looks like. Okay, I'll be there. But I reserve the right to heckle if you make coffee sound too dramatic. Deal, though I make no promises about avoiding drama. Your coffee is genuinely remarkable from a xenobiological perspective. She leaves Jake to his third cup and his recalibration work, and he spends the rest of his shift thinking about how strange it is that his morning routine has become a window into human nature. Coffee is just coffee, except apparently it's not. It's adaptation, risk management, social bonding, economic infrastructure, and voluntary cognitive enhancement all wrapped up in a cup of bean juice. Humans really are weird, he thinks, and apparently that's worth studying. The evening briefing room is packed. Jake arrives to find virtually the entire Kelthori crew present, which he wasn't expecting. Apparently word has spread that there's going to be a presentation about the human who drinks controlled substances casually, and everyone wants to see what the fuss is about. He takes a seat in the back, trying not to feel like a zoo exhibit, while Sira sets up her presentation at the front. She catches his eye and her ears do a little wave. the Kelthori gesture for thanks for being here. The lights dim. Sira's first slide appears. Human resilience and chemical adaptation, a preliminary analysis of caffeine consumption patterns. My colleagues, Sira begins, her standard careful and clear. Today I want to share findings that have significantly altered my understanding of human psychology and adaptation strategies. For the past 6 months, I've been observing Engineer Tor's daily routines as part of my dissertation on cross-species behavioral patterns. What I've discovered is remarkable. She pulls up her second slide, chemical analysis of coffee. This is the substance that Engineer Tor's, and by extension most adult humans, consumes multiple times daily. As you can see, it contains caffeine at concentrations that would require medical supervision for Kelthori consumption. It also contains over 300 distinct aromatic compounds, various acids, and multiple alkaloids. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Jake tries to look neutral while being discussed like a particularly interesting science experiment. To provide context, Sira continues, if I were to consume the amount of caffeine Engineer Tor's drinks in a single cup, I would experience dangerous cardiac acceleration, potential neural damage, and would require immediate medical intervention. Yet he drinks 3 to 4 cups daily and describes this as normal. More murmuring. Jake catches phrases his translator renders as remarkable tolerance, and how are they still alive as a species? But it's not just the consumption itself that's remarkable, Sira says, moving to her next slide showing coffee shops, plantations, trade routes. Humans have built entire economic sectors around caffeine. They've created social rituals, professional specializations, global trade networks. They've domesticated a substance that, for most species, would be classified as a controlled drug requiring significant regulation. She lets that sink in before continuing. What we're witnessing is not recklessness, it's calculated adaptation. Humans don't avoid risk. They assess it, determine acceptable parameters, and proceed with safeguards in place. Engineer Tor's measures his coffee precisely. He knows his tolerance. He understands withdrawal symptoms. He's managing risk, not ignoring it. Jake is starting to understand why Sira was so excited about her findings. She's not just talking about coffee, she's talking about fundamental human psychology. This pattern, Sira continues, appears throughout human culture. They domesticate predator species and call them companions. They consume foods containing capsaicin, a chemical designed by plants to discourage consumption, and call it delicious. They engage in recreational activities with significant risk profiles purely for enjoyment. They explore dangerous environments, push technological boundaries, and regularly make choices that prioritize short-term benefit over long-term stability. She pauses for effect, and they thrive doing it. Human space exploration has been remarkably successful despite, or perhaps because of, their willingness to accept risk. Their technological innovation accelerates precisely because they're willing to experiment with incomplete safety data. Their social structures are remarkably resilient because they've learned to find joy in survival rather than merely enduring hardship. The presentation continues with more data, more analysis, more examples of human risk-taking behavior. Jake watches his species get thoroughly analyzed and finds himself nodding along. Sira's right, humans do all of this. They just don't think about it as remarkable because it's normal to them. In conclusion, Sira says, reaching her final slide, Engineer Tor's morning coffee is not just a beverage. It's a demonstration of fundamental human adaptation strategy. He's taking a substance that could be harmful, carefully controlling the dosage, accepting known risks in exchange for cognitive benefits, and doing so with such casualness that he offered to share the experience with me without considering it remarkable. She looks directly at Jake. That casualness, that normalization of carefully managed risk is what makes humans extraordinary. They don't just survive harsh conditions. They actively seek out challenges, domesticate them, and incorporate them into daily life. Coffee isn't remarkable to humans because they've made the remarkable routine. And that ability to make the dangerous safe through careful management and cultural integration, that's what defines human resilience. The presentation ends to what Jake thinks is approval, though Kelthori nonverbal communication still confuses him sometimes. Sierra takes questions, fielding inquiries about human metabolism, cultural practices, and risk assessment with the confidence of someone who's done her research thoroughly. Afterward, crew members approach Jake with new curiosity. The human engineer, who was just the guy who fixed things, has become the human, who casually demonstrates his species' remarkable adaptation strategies every morning. "Is it true you consume this daily without medical supervision?" asks one of the astrophysics researchers. "Yeah, pretty much every human adult does. It's completely normal for us." Remarkable. The astrophysicist's ears are tilted forward with interest. "And you experience no significant adverse effects?" "I mean, I get cranky without it, and too much makes me jittery, but mostly it just makes me functional." Jake shrugs. "It's really not that dramatic from a human perspective." "That's exactly what makes it dramatic from our perspective," Sierra says, joining the conversation. "You've normalized something extraordinary, made it invisible through sheer familiarity." "I guess so." Jake is still processing the idea that his morning routine is scientifically significant. "So what happens now? You write papers about my coffee consumption." "Multiple papers," Sierra confirms. "This is dissertation-worthy material. You've given me insight into human psychology that years of traditional observation never provided, all because you drink coffee and were willing to explain why." "Happy to help," Jake offers, "though I feel like I should get co-author credit." "Already added you to the preliminary paper draft," Sierra says with obvious satisfaction. "You're officially a contributing researcher now." "Do I get paid for this?" "You get your name in academic journals and the satisfaction of advancing xenobiological understanding." "I'd still prefer coffee." "Of course you would," Sierra says with what Jake now recognizes as affection. "Because you're human, and humans have priorities that make sense to them even when they baffle everyone else." Over the following weeks, Jake's coffee consumption becomes something of a phenomenon aboard the Verath. Crew members ask to observe his morning ritual. Scientists request interviews about human dietary practices. Even the captain mentions it during a briefing, noting that Engineer Tours has provided valuable insight into human cultural practices through his willingness to share personal routines. Jake takes it all in stride, continues his morning coffee ritual, and occasionally fields questions like, "Is it true humans also consume alcohol, which is literally a poison? And do you really keep predator species as household companions? And how do you decide which risks are acceptable?" His answer to most questions becomes variations on, "Yeah, humans do that. We find something dangerous and figure out how to make it safe enough to incorporate into daily life. It's kind of our thing." Sierra's paper on chemical augmentation practices in human culture. The case of caffeine consumption gets published in a prestigious xenobiology journal and becomes required reading for students studying human behavior. Jake gets cited as primary research participant and receives actual academic credit for drinking coffee and explaining why. 6 months after the initial coffee incident, Sierra approaches Jake one morning as he's preparing his usual cup. "May I try some?" she asks. "A very small amount with proper medical supervision, for research purposes." Jake hesitates. "Last time you just smelled it, you nearly fell over. Drinking it might be dangerous." "I'll take the smallest possible sip. Dr. Kelthais has agreed to monitor my vitals. I need to understand the full sensory experience to complete my analysis." Against his better judgment, though better judgment has never been his strong suit, Jake agrees. They head to the medical bay where Kelthais sets up more monitoring equipment than seems strictly necessary while looking at both of them like they're making poor life choices. One sip, Kelthais says firmly. And if your cardiac rhythm becomes irregular, I'm administering counteragents immediately. Understood. Sira takes the cup Jake offers with reverent care. She sniffs it first, still recoils slightly at the intensity but recovers faster than last time. Then carefully, she brings it to her lips and takes the smallest sip possible. Her pupils dilate immediately. Her ears shoot straight up. She makes a sound that's hard to interpret, but Jake's translator suggests means something like profound sensory experience. Oh, Sira whispers. Oh, I understand now. Understand what? Jake asks. Why you do this, why it's worth the risk. Sira's looking at him with new comprehension. The clarity, the alertness. The way everything suddenly feels sharper, more focused. This isn't just a stimulant, it's enhancement, optimization. You're not just staying awake, you're upgrading your processing capacity. Welcome to caffeine, Jake says. You're experiencing about 1/10 of what humans consider a normal dose. Kelthais is watching his monitors with alarm. Her neural activity has increased by 22%. Cardiac rhythm is elevated but stable. This is extraordinary. This is what humans do every morning, Jake points out, multiple times a day for years. Your species is either incredibly resilient or incredibly mad, Kelthais mutters. Can it be both? Sira asks. She's still holding the cup, staring at it like it's a religious artifact. I need to add a chapter to my dissertation. Personal experiential data. This changes everything. You're having a revelation because you tried coffee, Jake observes. I'm having a revelation because I understand now what it means to be human. Sira sets down the cup carefully. You don't just survive harsh conditions. You harness them. Make them work for you. Coffee isn't just a drink, it's a tool. And you've been using tools to enhance yourselves for thousands of years. Fire, agriculture, technology, coffee, Jake lists. Yeah, humans are pretty good at finding things that make life easier or better, and integrating them into our routines. It's more than that. Sira's ears are doing complicated things that suggest deep thought. You've built a civilization on the principle that if something is dangerous, you figure out how to make it safe enough to be useful. That's remarkable. That's uniquely human. She looks at Jake with expression that might be respect or might be awe. Thank you for sharing this with me, both the coffee and the insight into your species. You've taught me more about humanity than years of academic study could have. Happy to help, though I mostly just drink coffee and answer questions. That's exactly what made this valuable, Sira says. You weren't trying to impress me or make humans look good. You were just being yourself. And being yourself turned out to be extraordinary. Jake doesn't really know how to respond to that, so he just nods and pours himself another cup. Because he's human, and humans drink coffee, and apparently that simple act tells you everything you need to know about what makes humanity unique. They domesticate danger, make the complex look simple, turn the extraordinary into routine, and they do it all while caffeinated. Later that evening, Jake finds a message in his personal queue. It's from Sira, attaching the final draft of her dissertation. The dedication reads, "To engineer Jake Torres, who taught me that understanding humanity requires not just observing what they do, but understanding why they do it, and appreciating that